Hey, this is Zacklog the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate,
Hello, I'm Letters.
and we are once again joined by our friend Chris,
Hello.
and
Band
we
back
are
together.
get the band is back together. Um, and we are getting together tonight to talk about the Robert W. Service poem, Just Think. Um, and Nate has graciously volunteered to read that for us. Before we get to that, quickly, reminder, if you like my work, if you like what I do, you want to help me keep doing this, you can do so via Subscribestar. That's subscribestar.com/Zacklog-the-great. And you can sign up to support me over there if you're interested. And there's a couple other, neat little benefits, but not a ton yet because I don't have a ton of subscribers yet. Anyway, um, but as I said, Nate has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight, so I'm gonna get that up on the screen. Not that, not that. There we go. Okay, let me know when we have that.
I've got it.
Okay, go for it.
Just Think by Robert W. Service. Just think, some night the stars will gleam upon a cold gray stone, and trace a name with silver beam, and lo, 'twill be your own. The night is speeding on to greet your epitaphic rhyme. Your life is but a little beat within the heart of time. A little gain, a little pain, a laugh lest you may moan, a little blame, a little fame, and a star gleam on a stone.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. So, Chris, would you like to get us kicked off with your first thoughts on this one?
Uh, sure. Uh, well, I mean, it's a reminder of our mortality, uh, which is a very simple message, but also one that is very deep and easy to talk about without really grasping what you're talking about. The whole, all men are mortal thing. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think it's very useful to think about. I think it's a healthy thing to keep in your mind to a degree. But at the same time, you can't live in that.
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I thought you had a little had a little more there. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly possible to overdo it to become just morbidly obsessed with the idea fat and depressed because we're all going to die and what does any of this mean. Um, at the same time, it's also certainly possible to make the other error and never think about this at all and just drive it away from your mind at all costs, and if you have to, just do nothing but constantly distract yourself to avoid thinking about this. And that's not good either. A life well lived is going to be lived, at least in part, in recognition of this, in understanding that by the way, there's an end point to this someday, and you have to be thinking about that. You have to be aware of that and living your life, understanding that's coming. How about? Oh, go ahead.
Well, my thoughts on it were I found it kind of amusing. when I started reading it again, this morning, I kind of read over it a couple times, get it in my head, try and shape some thoughts about it during the day, really settle in. And it occurred to me that the way I'm reading it is like, it almost sounds like sprightly. Like, just think, one day you'll be dead. It's great. But I think we tend to think of death as too much of a negative. Look, the promise of mortality is a blessing. Okay, because to think about being trapped on this degenerating earth forever, oh my God, that's torturous. I am glad that one day there will be a cease and I will get to go on to something else. I will get to meet God in his heaven and, stand through eternity in a perfect paradise rather than spending it here watching the bearings wear down on this flawed machine. So yeah, just think. This isn't forever. That's excellent.
Well,
And so it sort of tempers it for me, this whole idea of dying, because I've got a lot to live for, and I got a lot I want to do and all of that. So I mean, I'm not like, yes, let the dark tide wash over me. Come, oblivion. I still very much want to live, but it is nice to know that at the end there is an end.
Well, I hadn't thought of that before, but it's kind of like thinking of a book series or like a TV show that you like, and then like I'm increasingly painfully aware of this, like that if with a book series, for instance, if the author does not have a defined endpoint, some closing goal that it's coming to, at some point, if he keeps writing these books, they're going to become, for the vast majority of authors, at some point they're going to start becoming kind of repetitive and kind of stupid, and you're going to like wish that he had quit.
Or the power creep is going to get ridiculous.
That as well, and it's like it's a little bit like that with life as well, in that it's a you can think of your life as a story, and at some point the story is going to come to an end, and if you think of TV series that went on far too long, maybe ending at that point was a far better thing. Heroes, for instance, Heroes should have ended after the first season, because everything after that started going downhill really quickly.
Well, that was also during the writer's strike. I think that had more to do with it.
Yeah, but like, I don't know how long the writer's strike didn't go on multiple years, and it never seriously improved after the first season was over. It
point.
Just kind of went downhill, and so finding a stopping point, which is not a metaphor I was thinking about. By the way, so
the
yes,
stopping point you find is midair over the shark. You're like, you look down, is that a shark? Yeah, we're done. We're good.
By the way, this is the collection I got. I'm getting this from the Best of Robert Service, and these little tabs. Those are the ones I marked. I have a lot of Robert W. Service I'd like to get to. He's a pretty great writer. So I don't know if I'm gonna end up being able to cover all of those, but yeah. But it's yeah, Nate, how about you? Your overall impressions here.
I mean, overall impressions, it's like, yes, this is why I do the things I do. This is why I try and serve people. I try and help when I can. I try and, make sure I hang out with my kids and love my wife and do all those things because by God, it seems like, I mean, I may have 40, 50, 60 years left in my life. And that seems like a vastly long time. But by the time those 40, 50, 60 years are gone, I know it's not going to feel like it was all that long. And opportunities come and go, but some of them don't reoccur. Like I was having special time with my third son, Sammy. And yes, I understand how kind of creepy that name sounds for the thing, but it is their special time that nobody else can intrude on, that they get my full attention. It's just me and them doing something, playing a game, watching a show. Me and Sammy made a lizard keychain out of beads, which was fun. And I'm sitting there and kind of thinking of this poem while I'm, working on this little bead craft with him, thinking that, yes, this is what you're supposed to do with the knowledge that your time is finite and you don't know how much it is. You spend it wisely. And so, like I said, I've never been super bummed out by the idea that one day there's an end. I have the advantage of faith that I can be fortified against that fear, and I know that when the end comes, hey, to die is gain, right? I leave all this pain and disappointment, and I get to join the heavenly choir. It's going to be wonderful. But until then, until such time as that, I want to use my time on earth to, grow good young men and to, like I said, to help whoever it's in my power to help.
Yeah, and it's and kind of like I said, living, having this in the back of your mind, at least some of the time, can kind of help keep you focused, kind of can help you remember, hey, is this a really important thing that I should be spending my time on? Because I only have so much of that time, and that's a valuable thing to keep in mind. I also think, and just in terms of the way of the interaction of the way this is written and the idea it's conveying, I think I don't know that this was on his mind, but it's a very short and very it's a very brief thing. It's not a long drawn out meditation, which is also exactly what he's saying about your life. Your life could be will be, in retrospect, your life will be much shorter than you were thinking. And it's kind of funny. I remember having having a conversation with a friend of mine a while several years ago, and it's like when you're a little kid, a couple of months seems to last forever. And then at some point, once you're an adult, you reach this stage where you're like, wow, where did that decade go? and it's a kind of shocking feeling. So yeah, and I'm quite sure that when I do reach that point, I'll be like, wow, that was a fast ride. that was a lot quicker than I expected it to be. And so make good use of your time.
Yeah, and being aware of your mortality in a well balanced, you do kind of get we've talked about the the good sides and the bad sides, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of depressing to think that one day you won't be here, but also just anything that's bothering you now, all the things that you're worried about, it's like in the frame of history, like if you think of people just 100 years from now, most of that's not going to be that big of a deal. Like the day-to-day things that frustrate us, it's like 100 years from now, nobody's going to even remember this happened. There are, of course, that happened, but the individual is going to have very little influence on that. So for a lot of the little things, keeping that in context, and it's like, okay, well, what is important here? Like Nate was saying, spending time with his children. But just in general, I think for most people, whether you're, worried about things or you're just, trying to get as much money or whatever as possible, nobody is going to really remember that. But the good things you do, or even the bad things, like if you do good things for the people around you, that's going to change them in some maybe small way, but some way. And then that's going to affect the people around them, like Nate raising his children. They're going to be in the world, they're going to do things, they're going to affect people. Where even if, 100, 200 years from now, nobody remembers the name, Nate, last name here, like he will have made an impact. And that's something that, again, like this is one of those things where the more you dive deep into the concept, the more little things you start to realize that put your life in context.
Well, and that also, like, how are you going to remember, what is your legacy? That's also in here. It's not like, hammered on, but it's like that night is speeding on to greet your epitaphic rhyme. Like something is going to be written, on your tombstone. And is it just going to be your name and a couple of dates, or is it going to be a message from the people who cared about you? Is it going to be the people who is it going to be your children or grandchildren saying how much you meant to them? And again, living your life in light of that, like what kind of story am I going to leave behind me? That matter. That's a good guidance, a good guiding point as well.
I think there are a lot of people out there that don't have enough story in their life, and I think it's honestly because we don't read enough stories. Like people don't spend as much time considering great heroes and adventures anymore. We have Sex in the City. And people want to think about that or what the Kardashians are doing. Look, man, I grew up with westerns and adventure stories and all this stuff. Reading about oh god, like old Stormalong, right? This giant of a sailor man who finds a ship. The only ship he can ever sail, really sail on, is this epic clipper ship that they said they had to hinge the topsail so the moon could go by. And just his ship got attacked by a giant squid, and so he dove into the water and tied all of its tentacles in knots with big sailor's knots, then climbed back out to the ship and was like, yeah, he ain't getting out of that. This huge stuff, and it makes you think that, hey man, I understand, I will never be Stormalong John. I'm not going to be Pecos Bill. I'm not going to be, Tyrell Sackett. I'm not going to be these guys. But I can take what these guys are. They're big, open-hearted, willful characters that are like, hey, you know what? Everything's going to come at me, and I'm going to kick it to the curb. It may take more than one kick sometimes, but I'm still doing it. And I'm going to do this. And I will make my mark with fortitude, passion, and a bit of, and just a bit of humor. And I'm going to live my life richly. I'm not going to get too worried about, oh, I better make money, or, oh, I better do this. No, I'm going to do what, I'm going to try and find, like I said, that richness in it. Because in the end, your life comes down to a dash between a set of numbers. That little bite of time that you have right there. And so is your bite of time going to be a saltine cracker, or is it going to be a goddamn cheesecake? I have opted for cheesecake.
Well, and this is that's actually something I've talked about on one of my solo videos a little bit before, and I'm actually going to be talking about again. Like we need heroes. We need people that to look up to, people to emulate. It's part of how we're built, and it's part of how we become better than we are. We look at we look at people of men of great courage, or of of great of great intellect, men, and kind of like you said, if all you have is kind of today's pop culture, you really don't have great options. And I really think like I said, I've talked about this before, but like since I've learned through other means of like people like Audie Murphy and Alvin York, and like other characters from history, and I'm like, why did my history classes in high school and college never talk about any of these people? These are fantastic stories. These are a lot more interesting than almost anything any of those teachers spent time on. And like, okay, you can't spend an entire week on one of these guys, but like
Sure
if
you
you're
could.
doing well, I mean,
You
in
probably
terms
should.
in terms of like getting an overview of history for your class, but like you can talk about like you can talk about one of these guys. You can talk about Audie Murphy for a little bit for one class in the middle of the set on World War II, and suddenly it's not just these big this army did this and this army went here and there was this diplomatic trouble between these two nations. No, there's this person, and look at all the amazing things he accomplished, and what he went through, and it's a lot more interesting. And also it's like, oh, that's I will probably never be in that kind of situation, but that's an interesting example of how you can how you can face up to apparently impossible circumstances.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
but yeah, it's like we could go on, I'm sure the three of us, for quite a while talking about reforms that should be made in our educational system. But I do think, yeah, there's a lot to be said about taking the time not to worry so much about teaching to a test or doing a grand overview, but giving the students a story that they'll find so interesting that they'll want to learn more on their own. But it's
Well,
hard to test that sort of thing.
well, and it's also like it's not just like in terms of learning a set of facts. You know, stories are also really how we learn a lot of how I think we really learn a lot of morality. How we learn about right or wrong, how we make it a part of us, not just a list of rules, is through stories. And you look what if you look at the Gospels and you look at how Jesus taught, a lot of what he did was telling stories, and helping people under like using that to show people this is what you ought to be, this is what you want to avoid. That's pretty powerful, and that's pretty important. And we haven't been doing a great job of that for some time.
And one of the benefits of historical biographies is, getting back to the poem, it's going to discuss their death. It's going to discuss their legacy. So in the span of a book, which, you know, could be rather long, but still is a condensed version of someone's life, you see all the things that made them who they are, how they affected the world, and then their death, like sort of all sewn together into a nice narrative where you can actually put them in context, which we all know isn't how life works, but it's still a context that you can learn from and keep in mind, well, you know, what will people think of me when I'm going? If someone were to write my biography, you know, what would be the important things? What would they say about me? What, like, if they were to interview the people I left behind, how would they describe me? What are the moments they would remember? And I do not want to restart my computer right now.
Oh, those reminders.
That is the important thing. You know, like I said, a lot of what I talk about to other people, to my kids, to, you know, that I think about as I go around, you know, and just kind of rattling around stuff in my head is the idea of purpose. A lot of people don't have it these days, and that is why so many people are depressed. That's why there's so much, you know, just seeking for gratification, because they mistake gratification for satisfaction. But you really, unless you have a purpose, unless you serve something bigger than yourself, and I know I've banged on about this in this channel, if you don't serve something larger than yourself, you will never really find satisfaction, unless you are the worst kind of person. In that case, yes. A person that can be fully satisfied in and of themselves and by just the gratification of their own needs is a nightmare of a being. If you are that person, change. But like I said, and so, you know, and just it's just another thing that having this kind of gentle reminder, you know, given to you, just as sort of, hey, just think, one day it's just going to be a tombstone. That's the only thing left of you. You know, it's a good thing. It's, hey, just think. You still have time to find a purpose. You still have time to find meaning and to give meaning. But you don't have all the time.
There is actually a website. I remember I don't know how I found this, but I remember finding this a long time ago with some of my friends. It's deathclock.com. And like you originally it was a little bit simpler. They've since added a couple of other factors that you can input. But originally it was just you put in your birth date and whether you're a man or a woman, and it gives you you know, based on the average lifespan, um how the projected date of your death, and then it has a countdown of how many seconds you have left.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it says about me, but from the time I've seen this, I've always found it morbidly humorous. I don't pull it up too often, but I do remember the day they said. So you know, it would be kind of interesting if I, you know, actually died at that time. If I remember, and if that website is still there, I will have that counter up and going that day and just see what happens.
Well, apparently it is a phenomenon where past a certain age, you're much more likely to die, like on your birthday. Like there's this idea that people have, well, I wanted to make it to like such and such age. And apparently just having that little bit of willpower, like if you get close to say 90, like you're like, okay, I made it. But yeah, like memento moris used to be a thing. Like it used to be important for people to have some reminder of their mortality as they went about their daily lives. And then was it in Rome, whenever people would like have a parade in their honor, there would be that guy behind them saying, you are but a man.
Yeah, and it's again, to get back to the poem, the last stanza here, it's just, again, the overall topic is kind of depressing, but like a little gain, a little pain, a laugh lest you may moan, a little blame, a little fame. And that's a pretty good summary. And among other things, it's also in a weird way encouraging, because it's like, okay, you're in a rough patch right now, okay? You're having a really bad day, a really bad week, a really bad month. Okay. Whatever you're going through, odds are very good, you're going to get past this, and there's probably, a better time on the other end of it. Yes, there's some pain, but there's probably going to be some laughs on the other end of this, and there's going to be some gain, and there's going to be some recognition. And by the way, since all of us screw up sometimes, there's also going to be some shame. And so, like, again, keeping the big picture in mind, which is exactly what we don't do when things are going really wrong. When things are going really wrong, what we have the tendency to do is to like focus in right on this moment, right on these things going wrong, and just lose all other perspective. And having a reminder like this, I think, is a pretty handy thing as well in that respect.
As you were saying that, I had the thought that you're going to go through a lot of things over the course of your life, and only one of them is going to kill you. What are the chances that this is that one thing?
I like it.
What's the from Terry Pratchett? Whatever does not kill us can only make us stronger. Yes, but whatever does kill us leaves us dead.
Yeah. So there was this one thing that I actually heard this morning that I was like, oh, that would actually be perfect for the conversation tonight. So there has been, like, I just looked this up for a quick overview, and yeah, there's actually been a decent amount of research showing that the more aware you are of your mortality, the more conservative you tend to be.
Mm-hmm.
Where even just like reminding people that they're going to die, you give them political questions, and all of a sudden they're more conservative than they were before they were thinking about it.
I wonder if this can be a stealth way of influencing an election. Like, you're not supposed to be like doing you're not supposed to be doing campaigning within like such and such yards of an election booth, but like you could be just standing there dressed up like the Grim Reaper. That's not you don't have any candidate's name on there.
I suppose.
Remember, queer
it
thou art
depends
mortal?
on. I suppose that depends on the specific issue that the voter is thinking about. But yeah, I was like, that actually makes sense, even from like a not political point of view. It's like, yeah, like young people do really stupid things sometimes, that whenever you're older and you have a little concept of oh, like this body can actually take permanent damage, you're all of a sudden less likely to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Which on the one hand can be one of the benefits of being young, but needs to be tempered to some degree, otherwise you don't get to be old.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I was thinking, well, once you do start thinking about what your legacy is going to be, there has to be some stable form of society or some structure for your legacy to be passed down through.
Yes, you're not going to have there is no such thing as a legacy if everything is constantly torn down and replaced with the current thing. By the way, I would just like everyone to know I support the current thing. I don't know if do you guys support the current thing? I'm not sure what the current thing is right now, but I support it. Um,
I mean, the current thing
You
is the
see,
same thing it's always been, which is to say, water moving in a direction.
you see, I don't know that I would necessarily say I support the current thing exactly as it is. I think in general, yes, but to put this into a little bit of context. So like I am, Southern Baptist. And one of the things that I think is very important that the Catholic Church does that we generally don't do is the Catholic Church tends to have a much longer view of history within, you know, Protestant denominations and Southern Baptist, specifically. Sometimes we forget what we were about, like just like 40 years ago. Like I just think about like the whole point of the Baptist faith and message was they were supposed to draft a decision on whether or not the Southern Baptist Convention was in favor of evolution or opposed to evolution. And the committee that wrote the first Baptist faith and message, they don't even address it because they're like, this isn't an issue. You can be a good Southern Baptist whether you believe in evolution or not. And then you jump back to like the 80s and 90s, and it was decided, no, if you believe in evolution, you can't be a Southern Baptist. And a lot of people today don't even realize that history, and we've moved on a lot of different topics that way because we don't really have a good method for keeping our history like within our memory and adjusting it in that context. Whereas that's something the Catholic Church does very well. When they drift away, there's going to be some group within the Catholic Church that says, I think we need to get back to how we used to do things. And I think, there's two sides to it. Because again, I'm a Southern Baptist. I think Southern Baptist does a lot of things well. But there are things like you do need some sort of institutional memory going from generation to generation.
Well, and another thing that kind of goes along with that, and that we've been, that also connects to other things that we've talked about, is like, I think something else the Catholic Church does really well is, by the way, here are all these fantastic stories of, of heroes of the faith from the past. And, here are examples that you should look up to and, try to emulate. Um, and there's quite a few of them, and they cover quite a lot of ground. Also, I to people who think Christians or Catholics at least don't have a sense of humor. Saint Lawrence is the patron saint of cooking. Okay. Um, and if you don't know why that's funny, look him up and how he became a martyr. Um, but yeah, it is having being able to look forward and saying and realizing there's going to be an end point, and also looking backward to those who were before you. It's kind of part of the same thing. And want considering and what is going to be my legacy, what are people going to say once I'm gone, like a natural response to that is, well, what about those, what legacies should I remember, and what legacies am I building on? And that's a natural, it's the next it's the next natural logical question, and that's also a pretty important part of the life well lived. So, well, I think I've got most of what I wanted to say about this poem, and it is, as I said earlier, and appropriately so, a relatively short one. Um, Nate, did you have any last thoughts you want to put in here?
Hmm. I'm going to go back to what I said about how it felt a little lighthearted, and I want to point to that one more time. And that is to remind people, do not fear death. Live in such a way that your death is just the end, it's just a different time. Don't go through your whole life fearing that, oh gosh, one day it's going to end. Just understand that it's like it's like a race. It's like any kind of endeavor where there is a marked finish point. Do as much as you can in that time and live your life such that when death finally reaches for you, you don't have to say no, I need more time. You can just be like, yeah, hold on, let me put this one last piece. All right, let's go. Death isn't chasing you, he's watching you. Give him a good show.
Chris, how about you? Any last thoughts you want to put in here?
Yeah, so thinking about your own mortality can be kind of difficult, and it doesn't seem very fun. So I guess, for what it's worth, my advice would be let yourself be bored. Like if you're always doing stuff that distracts you, you're not going to think about it. But whenever you're bored, like even if you just take like 10, 15 minutes where you're not watching TV, listening to a podcast or playing a video game or something, your mind like will drift to the deeper things. And it can be difficult, but it's worth it. And if you don't allot a little bit of time during your, waking hours to do it, like it can keep you up at night, and that's much less present. Whenever you're, surrounded by the darkness and thinking about horrible things, it just makes it so much worse.
Yeah, and that's an entirely new topic, which I don't know how much I want to get into, but yeah, like I think that is a big problem, and that's something I need to work on. Certainly myself is that it's way too easy today to constantly reach for distractions, to constantly okay, feed me things to think about rather than just be alone with yourself for like 5 minutes. And it's definitely a good discipline, to learn. It's definitely a good thing to force yourself to no, I could, pick up my phone and look at Facebook or YouTube or whatever. But I'm not going to do that for the next half hour. I'm not going to do that for the next, I'm not going to do that every Friday or something, and just learn to be with yourself a little bit. And that's a pretty important thing. And I think I need to work on it more definitely as well. So, okay. Well, then that was a interesting conversation, and thank you both for joining me. And God be with you.
Also with you.
Have a good one.